Okay, starting a new series here where I read through old essays that I haven't published and haven't looked at in a long time. Here we go. Hi, my name is Prince. I'm a writer. I published a book a few years ago titled When They Tell You to Be Good. I write about culture, blackness, gender, radical movements, and I make video essays. Here's an essay I wrote a few years ago titled How Childhood Cinema Explores the Evils of Capitalism. I was 8 years old when I picked up a horror movie during one of the many visits to the movie rental store that my older cousin took my brother and I to. I can't remember the title, but the cover artwork was dark, beguiling, and featured a grotesque clown. Upon getting home and starting the movie, we soon realized it wasn't just a horror movie. During one of the film's earliest scenes, the female main character pulled her skirt upwards and took her friend into her with a moan. My older cousin and I shared a look. She grabbed her phone and walked out of the room while saying, "Cover your eyes when you're supposed to. I'm taking a phone call." The dilapidated hospital, murderous clown, and long drawn out moans of the woman during the softcore scenes gave sex a gloomy air to me. At the time, I convinced myself the film was jarring because of the cheesy gore, but over time, I learned to realize that it was both the trope of the salacious, slutty girl in the horror film that bothered me, and the way the camera simply breezed over the nude male lead. My brother and I covered our eyes at the right times, but I still tried to peek to catch some spare parts of his flesh. As a millennial writer and creative, I often think about how my generation was the first to come of age with the advent of the internet. AOL, instant messaging, being yelled at for using the dial up internet when our parents needed to use the phone, flirting with boys on trevorspace.net, and eventually Tumblr were all monumental points of experimentation and world building for me. Despite all of these innovations, the most meaningful forms of media for me as a child were the films I was watching when I wasn't reading. Many of my childhood weekends were spent with my cousin, taking my brother and I to the movie theater or to rent DVDs to watch on weekend nights. This older cousin lived in a duplex with my aunt, who chain smoked and always had grape sodas in her fridge. I'd wander into her bedroom during my many stops in her kitchen, play with her perfumes, and use her VHS player. Out of all of her tapes, Titanic was my favorite, but the film did not only captivate me. It was Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On, which broke the record at the time for most radio plays in a single week in February 1998 with 117 million plays. The film won 11 Oscar awards. In September 1998, the double cassette set of Titanic hit stores. Blockbuster stores stayed open until 2 a.m. in order to sell the cassettes at midnight. While sitting on my aunt's bed, I marveled at Rose's wealth, which was framed by her manufactured femininity in elaborate gowns and corsets. Jack's character was portrayed with a zeal for life, encompassed by how passionately he loved, how seriously he protected his joy, and how easily he could see that money tainted reality. Jack the artist, the vagabond, the free smiling dreamboat staring back at you, became my first muse and boyhood crush. The dichotomy between Rose and Jack's challenges took on a meaning for me as I got older. After the murder of Michael Brown and the lack of indictment against cop Darren Wilson while I was in college, something moved inside of me and then exploded. I saw Rose's entrapment by high society and narcissistic men, as well as Jack's zeal for life and my own musings about what the adult world could offer me, a gay black man. I traveled abroad extensively after I finished college and moved out of Ohio. In Paris, I was tear gassed during a protest for the first time and stumbled through a cloudy plaza as police sirens echoed. In Manila, I met a boy that made my heart race, and though I never kissed him, I am sure I would have fallen in love if I did. In Tijuana, I digitized important documents of Central Americans attempting to seek asylum in the US and played with their children during workshops. By 25, I learned the lesson that Huey Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, mused about in his book Revolutionary Suicide, where he writes, "But before we die, how shall we live? I say with hope and dignity. And if premature death is the result, that death has a meaning reactionary suicide can never have. It is the price of self-respect. But the more I went into the world, the more that I thought about my roots and what messages had been planted in its soil. whether through nature or nurture. In the journey from being a frazzled black kid watching Titanic for the 80th time to 23-year-old me disrupting a Bill Clinton speech in the name of those incarcerated by the 1994 Violent Crime and Prevention Bill would not have occurred without the anti-blackness that America has borne and the tools I found along the way to help me understand it. For me and many other radical young adults, childhood cinema and coming of age films were some of the earliest vehicles of anti-capitalist ideals, like autonomy, feminism, valuing communal living more than the comforts of capitalist life. Films oriented towards childhood, like Airbud, like Mike, Akeelah and the Bee, and Holes, show children resisting the rigid, lonesome, and unimaginative trappings of adulthood and capitalism. Coming of age films or films involving young adults confronting the arrival of adulthood tend to equate maturity with keeping one's integrity amidst temptations of a mundane life under late stage capitalism. Young white middle class teenagers that are coming of age tend to try to have fun before fully assimilating to white patriarchal America, versus films with marginalized people who come of age through confrontations with the evils of the state. White kids skip school or steal their parents' cars, and black kids, i.e., The Hate U Give, mature through grappling with the murder of a close friend at the hands of police. In the 1997 movie Airbud, a golden retriever named Buddy escapes an alcoholic and abusive owner that exploits the dog by forcing him to do tricks during his own clown performances. Partway through the film, Buddy finds Josh, a 12-year-old boy grieving his late father and adjusting to a family move to the state of Washington. The movie uses death, which is a typical intervention in childhood cinema, as a tool to make Josh question his reality as a young boy attempting to come of age. Beyond being a tale of a boy overcoming grief, it is a champion's tale of Josh and Buddy overcoming the obstacles of capitalism. A clown's greed and rage, which compels him to abuse and exploit a dog. The savagery of toxic masculinity displayed by the basketball team's first coach and Larry's father. And the death of childlike fun for the sake of physical competition or financial success. The film begs the question of what greed and toxic masculinity turns us into when gone unchecked. From its first moments, the audience is compelled not to identify with Snively, the clown, because we are given no justifications for his substance use or brash behavior. He is a character consumed by his own misery to the point of harming his pet. The mirrors to Snively's character are easily the two other domineering men of the film. The first coach of the basketball team and Larry's father. Buddy, once he inadvertently escapes Snively, softens the heart of Josh, who has become nearly mute and has given up his passion for basketball. The joy that Buddy brings to Josh's household is tenfold. He bonds Josh with his mother again, who in turn allows Josh to keep the dog on Christmas Day and gives the boy a sense of camaraderie he cannot readily find with his male peers. Buddy, an innocent dog and victim of abuse, compels the viewer to see how humans and animals become the unlikely victims of an economic system that conditions men to harm others. Every morning, Buddy hides the newspaper delivered to the Fran residence, a coping mechanism after surviving Snively, an owner that would harm him with said newspaper. Despite the fact that it premiered when I was 3 years old, the film was a staple of my childhood, alongside other films like Fly Away Home and Free Willy, which allowed animals to awaken children to confront a world and community not fully developed, not fully yet destroyed by the demands of the adult world. 2002's Like Mike follows the journey of Calvin, a black kid awaiting adoption in a group home. When he discovers that wearing a pair of Michael Jordan's old sneakers gives him savant basketball abilities, Calvin's poverty and social displacement as an orphan leads him to desire the comfort of black middle-class life, as represented in one of his favorite shows, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Right, I actually think in the movie, it's a show that's like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Anyway, this wonder at the conveniences of higher class positions is exhibited through the film when Calvin joins the NBA, is in awe at the luxurious hotels that the teams stay in while traveling, the food he can order through room service for free on the NBA's dime, and the scale of his teammate Tracy's mansion. The film gifts Calvin and the other orphans with an implicit class and age consciousness. During the visiting hours for prospective parents, Calvin's bully, Oz, tells him, We're like dogs. Parents only want the puppies. This imparts the lesson that children are only valuable when they are young, cute, and innocent to the faults of a world that leaves them parentless. As the film starts, we are made to believe that Oz or even Tracy Reynolds are the antagonists. Tracy Reynolds is a renowned black NBA player who allows his masculine ego to rule the way he treats others, including Calvin once he is signed onto the NBA. Initially annoyed by Calvin's childish antics, Tracy changes his tune once Calvin is punished for his loyalty to him when he drives a drowsy and drugged Tracy home in order for them not to break the team's curfew rule. In Tracy's realization that wealth and status are not as important as he once believed, both his and Calvin's truest desires are awakened to have a loving family. This desire is doubly awakened in Calvin's friend Mirth, who Calvin invites to be adopted with him by Tracy. Holes, the 1998 book by Louis Sacker turned 2003 film, is another example of how child-oriented media can critique the capitalist institutions around us. The main character, Stanley Yonats, is given an ultimatum by a judge after he is falsely accused of stealing a pair of sneakers. Go to Camp Green Lake or go to jail. Stanley, unaware that Camp Green Lake is not actually a camp, but a variation of a juvenile correctional facility, chooses to go to Camp Green Lake because he'd never been to one due to his family's poor income. To start, Camp Green Lake, which is a supposed place for bad boys, is host to countless abuses. The boys are forced to dig 5 by 5 feet holes in 90-degree weather, while at risk of scorpion, snake, or yellow-spotted lizard bites. The holes that the boys are forced to dig in search of buried treasure for the warden are a loose iteration of the indentured servants and slaves working the plantation fields, the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which allows for slavery and involuntary servitude to be punishment for a crime whereof the part shall have been duly convicted, and even prison plantations like Parkham Farm. Parkham Farm was a correctional facility in Mississippi where inmates, including prominent Black activist Kwame Ture, could be forced to do dangerous work while dynamiting tunnels for rail companies, fed very little and sometimes punished with whipping or devices like the wrist breaker. Furthermore, the boys of Camp Green Lake are subject to the authoritarian nature of the camp leaders. They joke about the tiny cameras and microphones they imagine the warden has planted in various places to spy on them. The warden regularly threatens to scratch the boys and other camp leaders with her poisonous nail polish. When Hector Zeroni, one of Stanley's friends, runs away from the camp, the warden throws away all of his records to protect herself from a potential lawsuit on grounds of child endangerment. In its final chapters, Holes ultimately explores how friendship and rebellion can lead us, even the youth, to the truth about a corrupt system. Out in the desert, Stanley and Hector but their camaraderie leads to their salvation, exposing Camp Green Lake for child abuse. Hector finding his mother, and Stanley ending the long-time curse looming over his family. With numerous plot lines, the novel and film explores the many intersections of capitalism's evils. Exploitation of incarcerated people through the prison industrial complex, the immorality of authority figures through the camp warden, and a 19th century racism that brings an interracial love affair to a violent end. As a 9-year-old, Hector Zeroni was easily my favorite character. A survivor of his mother's absence and bouts of homelessness, Hector had been swallowed up by the modern prison system. Hector is ridiculed by both the adults and peers around him by being given the nickname Zero, because he is unable to read and write. His blackness, although nearly invisible to Stanley, and self-determination mattered very much to me. By middle school, however, I was poised to embark on a different trajectory than Hector Zeroni. For 3 summers, I spent numerous weeks in a summer program for underprivileged black boys from the inner city. Every morning and evening, the elderly driver that my mother hired would drive me the 27 miles that separated my world in East Cleveland to Chagrin Falls. The campus where this program was grand and comprised of brick buildings. Its glamour was expounded by the summer program's rituals, making us memorize the African American national anthem, the program's motto that we were made to recite upon command or have to do push-ups, the shaming of soft black boys, and the expectations of respectability. After I'd been poised and led to these spaces my whole life, I still felt not manly enough. The worst of my memories was an afternoon at the pool when a group of boys shoved me into the deep end with the knowledge that I couldn't swim. As I struggled and flailed silently in the water, they laughed. During the first summer of this program, we took a field trip to a local theater and watched Akeelah and the Bee. Set in the ghettos of Los Angeles, Akeelah is an 11-year-old logophile struggling to fit in with her peers. As a children's movie with a coming-of-age framing, the racial and economic lens is irremovable from how the viewer should experience Akeelah and the Bee. Though the film could easily be perceived as a tale of upward mobility and respectability, Akeelah and the Bee genuinely expresses more about Black communalism and how self-actualization impacts our deepest desires. Since the death of her father, Akeelah's intellect has often made her like the black sheep of her community, a notion that she frames the film in with her opening monologue about being uncomfortable in her own neighborhood. This discomfort is alleviated when she finds a stable mentor in Dr. Larrabee, who agrees to train her with the regional spelling bee. In one of the film's most energizing moments for Akeelah's internal and external journey, Dr. Larrabee forces Akeelah to read a quote by Marianne Williamson out loud. The quote partially reads, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others." But if children are meant to shine, then what does Akeelah and the Bee represent about how modern America robs young Black children, especially Black girls, of their innocence? When Akeelah is asked to advocate on her school's behalf or follow its rules, she expresses discontent at the fact that her school can't afford doors for their bathroom stalls, or that the students are forced to study in the stairwells. Her principal is pressed for funding for his school in an economically ravaged area, and sees Akeelah's intellect as a pathway to gaining resources that could help all the school's children. Despite her successes, Akeelah is seemingly invisible to her mother, who is preoccupied with supporting and disciplining her children as a single parent for a majority of the film. It is not until Akeelah swallows her pride and returns to Dr. Larrabee, a potential coach she offended during their last interaction, that her journey towards maroonage, or stealing herself back, begins. It is only when Akeelah begins to hone and develop her intellect through reading, understanding, and having power over language can she truly begin to realize her true self, a self untethered to the conditions of anti-Blackness. In the mentioned films and mediums, children are forced into a relative coming of age, but are still subjected to the care and guidance of their parents and responsible authority figures. By the end, Josh finds companionship with his family and his dog, Buddy and Airbud. Calvin and Murph become brothers as a part of a new family in Like Mike. Stanley and Hector escape the clutches of Camp Green Lake and Holes, then return home. Akeelah, through having achieved her dream of winning the Scripps National Spelling Bee, has a closer relationship with her family, community, and herself. Another angle of this analysis is looking at how films with underage or young adult characters handle the coming of age to adulthood, which becomes a violent confrontation of capitalism. Hatchet, by Gary Paulson, reframes this angle by forcing Brian Robeson, a teenager dealing with his parents' divorce, to survive in the Canadian wilderness alone, and without the conveniences of our economic system. The novel opens at the very moment that Brian's life changes forever, when the pilot of the plane he is flying in has a heart attack. Brian must learn how to survive physically and mentally in the wild. After being struck by porcupine thorns, he sobs in a cave and soon learns a lesson in survival, which is that feeling sorry for yourself didn't work. He finds beauty in the calamity and peace of the wilderness around him as he learns to live alongside animals and natural disasters. During many pivotal moments, he laments on the secret or the knowledge of his mother's affair, which he has not acknowledged to either of his parents. A younger version of myself loved Hatchet for similar reasons that I loved reading The Diary of Anne Frank. Neither shied away from the depths of what children could feel or survive. When Brian is rescued, he has been trapped in the wilderness for 54 days, lost 17% body fat. He often stops in grocery stores to stare at the aisles of food and wonder at the surplus of capitalism. The secret of his mother's affair, which at first mattered most of all, pales in comparison to the secret of life, which is that things we least expect often matter the most. In Titanic, Rose learns this lesson. Her life in high society sets her up to enter adulthood through her marriage with Cal Hoakley. Upon being smitten by Jack, a poor, adventurous, and creative shipmate, Rose flees her engagement and disowns her rich family as they attempt to disboard the sinking Titanic. Rose chooses love over wealth, but this decision nearly relegates her to the fate of the ship's poor patrons, who drown or freeze to death in the North Atlantic Ocean. Since watching Titanic is a bi-yearly tradition for me, I know that the film will continue to have a lifelong effect. I've always admired Rose's soft yet soulful courageousness in the face of familial pressure, and desired to embody Jack's wonder for new experiences. I latched onto the fact that their love affair was ephemeral and intentional. Jack's death, although devastating, holds value. Even a short life can be beautiful if well lived. Both teaching and a history of the young is achieved in these themes and motifs of anti-capitalism. The lessons imparted center friendship, communication, grit, consciousness, and a capacity to never truly abandon joy. For myself, a once closeted black kid who feared having to tell the world my truth, these lessons were life rafts that helped me confront the challenges ahead. If these characters could survive and learn something from their pain, so could I. This belief led me through college, working seasonal jobs across the country, riding motorcycles to waterfalls in the Philippines, confronting how this country systemically harms black, brown, and poor bodies, and finding a love for the craft of writing. We are all born into histories that are both good and bad. The bad of the world is what is forced upon us, especially children, who are the most vulnerable of all. The good is what we do to absolve the bad or to overcome it. Children have had a grave hand in this too. In 1986, thousands of children marched in Birmingham, Alabama, a nonviolent protest to address racial segregation and were jailed. These children were in the pursuit of freedom. These children in the pursuit of freedom faced high-speed water hoses, violent dogs, and were housed in cages. The children of today have movements of their own, from black teenagers in the streets for Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives, and the youth climate strike and beyond. Not only do we need to keep in mind that children are the makers of the future, but their repeated efforts throughout generations in combating the evils of capitalism via the world around us shows us that these views are more reflective of our societal feelings as a whole. Children's movies often carry anti-capitalist themes, reminding us that children are not just future makers, but active dreamers of different worlds. Their stories of resisting greed, corruption, and exploitation reflect deeper societal frustrations with capitalism, frustrations we may be less than willing to acknowledge as openly as we should. All right, we have read another essay. The experience of reading this essay is so interesting. I haven't looked at it in years. I think my thesis here still mostly stands up. I think there are a lot of things that I would envision or expand or really put in now even more, because I think I wrote this in 2020, but if I think of Trump 2.0 and the rise of fascism and the rise of parents' rights and how so much of right-wing ideology is based in this like fear of social contagion or great replacement theory, there's a lot to infuse in there about the manufactured fascism of adulthood and adult systems and how childhood is this place of being poisoned by adult ideologies, adult systems of violence, adult procrastinations of a deeper liberation. And so I'd probably would add more of that into this essay. And there's definitely more film and things that I've watched even since I've written this that I think are also interesting encapsulations of this central thesis about childhood cinema and anti-capitalism. I mean, I guess it's not considered a childhood film, but a film that I watched this year was Weapons, and it honestly blew me away. I loved how it explored addiction and obsession and what happens when something sinister enters the domestic space. And so I think there's a lot of analysis there that I could draw and pull in. But yeah, I mean, let me know what you think of the thesis of this essay. Do you agree that childhood cinema tends to have anti-capitalist messaging? Do you think there are films that go against this, like films? I don't know. I guess I don't know why I'm thinking of Home Alone. Like, is the Home Alone series anti-capitalist? I know in the later movies it's like a rich kid who's like in a mansion and his mansion is broken into. I don't know. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Talk to you later.